The next thing we want to do, we want to know whether the gun is loaded or not. And we want to do that without looking at the gun. This particular gun is a P365, a Sig Sauer, and it has no safety on it, and it has no indicator whether the gun is loaded or not. So you don't know whether it's loaded or not. And you do want to make sure that you know whether it's loaded. What I like to do is I like to pull the slide bag with my non-dominant hand and use the pinky, the little finger, to poke inside here and see if I can feel a bullet casing. If there's a bullet casing, that means the gun is loaded and active, ready to shoot. So I pull it back. Let me see if I can show you. You can see the cartridge in there. Now, I pull it back and I use my pinky to feel whether the cartridge is in there. You don't want to pull it back all the way because then the cartridge gets ejected. But I can feel it in there. And I know that way that the gun is loaded without looking at the gun, okay? Now, you notice that I have my finger behind the trigger here. To me, that's a safety mechanism on the P365. There's no way that the trigger can be pulled if I have my finger behind it. Another way to do that is to put the finger on the slide, on the side of the slide. I prefer to put it back here. When I holster the gun, I also put the finger behind the trigger. That way, no clothing will get caught and accidentally pull the trigger. How do you aim? Well, easiest way to aim is to get the front side and the rear side lined up on your target, and you should expect a certain amount of wobble on the front side on the target. It's only natural that there is a wobble on the front side when you line it up with the target. You can't hold it perfectly steady and focused on the target. By the way, when you hold the gun, some people have asked, how tightly should you hold it? Pretend it's a hammer. Hold it as tight as if it were a hammer. You know, when you pound a nail, you hold on to the hammer a certain way. You don't hold it onto it so your knuckles are right, but you give it a good grip. That's about the grip that you should use on a gun. All right, so when you aim, you anticipate the wobble, and then you put your trigger finger on the fingertip. You use the fingertip. You don't stick your finger all the way through. You use the fingertip on the trigger. And then you activate the trigger. Now some people say you squeeze the trigger. When you say squeeze, some people have a tendency to think that that means squeezing the gun. That's not the case. You only want to activate the trigger finger. The rest of the grip stays the same. So when you aim, you let that front side wobble if you have to, and then you activate the trigger and bang, it goes off. When the gun goes off, it should be a surprise to you. You should not jerk the trigger. You should not plan on pulling the trigger. It should be a surprise to you. A total surprise. So when you aim, boom, and it will always go where you expect it to go. Now here's a good example, a good exercise on how to use dry fire to see how you're doing with your pulling of the trigger, your activating of the trigger. The way you do that is you release the magazine so it's out a little bit out. It's still held in, but it's off. It's you activated the release on the magazine, and it comes out a little ways. Now there's a bullet in the chamber here, and we will fire that bullet. Now what will happen? The next bullet will not go in because the magazine is out. It's sticking out a little bit. So the gun will cycle, but no bullet will go into the chamber. Let's try that. Okay? There's no bullet in the chamber. If you wanted to check it, you can use your pinky test, pull back, and stick your pinky in there. And lo and behold, you see there's nothing in there. So you know that the gun is empty. At this point, you pull the trigger again and see whether the front side jerks when you actually pull the trigger, when you activate the trigger. If that's the case, that means you're anticipating the shot, and that's usually why you're missing where you're aiming at. So you squeeze again, or you activate the trigger. Did you hear it click? Nothing happened, and the gun didn't move. Now you can try that a couple of times. One way to make sure that the next bullet goes in, and you can try it again, is to do what's called a tap, roll, and rack. It is very common for a gun, for the magazine release, to release accidentally, whether when you're pulling it out of the holster, or accidentally push it with your thumb in excitement. It's not uncommon that the magazine will come partially out. You need to make sure that when that magazine comes out, you have a way of fixing that misfire. It's called a misfire. And the way you fix that misfire is you tap the magazine like this. You roll the gun to the side just in case there's a cartridge in there, so it will fall out. You know, gravity will help it. And then you rack. Now it's loaded again. So tap, roll, rack. That's the way you clear a misfire in case the magazine was partially out, or there's actually a misfire. The cartridge didn't fire. That happens sometimes. You know, cartridges aren't perfect. Not everyone will fire, although it happens very rarely. So now again, you aim, bang. Now, we forgot to take the magazine out again. We should have taken the magazine out. So let me fire one more shot, and this time I remove the magazine out again, so that the next round will not cycle into the chamber. Then we click again. Now that gun is steady on the target, and so now we tap, roll, cycle, and when you cycle, when you rack the slide, you pull it back and let it snap forward. Make sure that your finger is not on the trigger at the time and it's off to the side. I'll release the magazine again. Take aim. Bang. Another shot. Release the magazine. Now you can do this 4 or 5 times, and sooner or later you'll find that the gun will flinch as you do this when there is no round in the chamber, and that causes that makes you aware that you're not activating the trigger without anticipating things. Rack, tap, roll, rack. Release the magazine. Okay, I noticed on this one that I dipped down just a little bit. I dipped down just a little bit. So that would have been off center. If you want to see where I was shooting at, you can see I was hitting him pretty accurate. A couple of them were outside, but I didn't try to hit them very accurate. So I'll swing it over so you can see where it's at. First, I'm going to tap, roll, rack. Put my finger behind the trigger, snap it into the holster. That's it. Let me show you where we were shooting at. You can see they're pretty tight. It's about 21 feet from here. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Next exercise I'm going to go through is what happens when you face a threat, someone that is threatening your life or a loved one.